afternoon, ladies, and Alan and Jason. So good to see y'all here in person, not in little black screens. I cannot tell you how thrilled I was. Every time Diane said, we're bumping it so that we can keep it in person, I said, I am fine with that because I do not want to do another one of these things looking at 40 little black screens on my computer. So hey, one more round of applause. We are here. Woo! How wonderful. And I'm going to jump right in because we have 3.5 things that I think we really need to talk about right now. You know, we have been through a lot the past year. You know, Diane talked about it a little bit. And I feel like the things that have been rolling through my head the past couple of months we're starting to kind of crawl out. And the conversations I'm having with my friends and coworkers, there's really 3.5 things that keep bubbling to the surface. And I'm sure it's similar for you. So the first one is the low interest mortgages, right? The second one is things that we notice about people when we can't see half of their face. And the third one is Korean bathhouses. So I'm sure these have all come up in many of your post-pandemic conversations as well. So I'm gonna dive right in, all right? The first thing that I wanna talk about, okay? The low interest mortgage craze that is happening right now. So I don't know if this is, and we have a little shout out to our Gulf Coast Bank mortgage ladies that are here with us today. I don't know if this is happening for all of you, but for me, this phenomenon is coinciding with a certain era of life. And those two things colliding are causing all of my friends to move to the suburbs. Anybody having this, right? Because I'm at that age where like kids are getting to be teenager-y, people need to move to a bigger space, you know, get the kids further away. And you know, mortgage rates are so low that now we can afford that, you know, 4,000 square foot home in the wooden carriage heritage estate at Township Forest. A lot of people don't know this. There's actually a state statute that determines how many words have to be in your neighborhood name based on how far out you are from city center, multiplied by the median home price in that neighborhood. It also determines whether your neighborhood has to be at somewhere. So at Township Forest. So all of my friends are moving out to these big houses, and I'm in the middle of. I'm a Garden District person. I'm in Baton Rouge. You know, I'm in City Center. I'm holding tight. We're refinancing right now and trying to add on. and I find that with everyone who does this, I go through a very similar conversation with them as they embark on this journey. And I'm sure many of you have had this conversation, and maybe you've been on both sides of it, right? So it usually starts out with, you know, you see your girlfriend and she's like, hey girl, you gotta come out and see the new house. You're like, yes, I do. You know, we moved out to wooden carriage heritage estate at Township Forest. I heard that. You know, have you ever been out there? Yeah, I think I passed it once when I was going out to a field. I think I've seen that neighborhood. And they're like, girl, I mean, I can't even tell you, we have so much space. You know, they love to talk about how much space they have. You know, so much space inside. We don't know where we're gonna get all the furniture. So much space outside. We got a big outdoor kitchen. We've got an Olympic-sized polo court. You know, we just don't know what to do. You gotta come out and see it. You know, like I definitely, you know, for sure. And no matter how this conversation goes, there's one constant, absolutely for sure. They are going to talk about how far out they are not, right? And they're gonna use some landmark that is also a place you would never visit to show you how close they are to things. You know, like maybe the husband will jump into this point and be like, yeah, you know, I know. You're like, why would they move way out there? But, you know, I used to think that too. But I'm telling you, it's just really not that bad. It's just not that bad once you start heading out there. I mean, we're like 5 minutes from the Target in Malaysia. You know? And you're like, yes, I could see that. I believe you. Yeah, you know, you got to come out. You know, the wife might jump back in, girl, you know, and they're always going to wrap it up by inviting you to visit at a wildly inconvenient time. Like, did you get the invitation to Chesley Grace's birthday party next week? Wednesday at 2:30? You're like, yes, we did. And we are totally going to be there. Take a half day of PTO to go to that first-year-old birthday party. And I poke fun, I have so many friends who are going through this right now, we've laughed about this. But really, why we continue to have this conversation is because of a word that has become a big buzzword over the past year. And that word is belonging. Have y'all heard this word popping up? Workplace discussions, maybe in your church, talking about, family and being disconnected. This year that we have felt so disconnected, it has reminded us of one of the things that connects us so much as humans, which is the need to belong to groups. And our friends who move out to the suburbs, they're having kind of an existential crisis, right? Because they're worried they're not going to get invited to the front porch happy hours anymore because they're not right down the street. But they haven't made the new friends yet. So they don't know if they belong there yet. And they're kind of in between belonging, and they're just wanting to cling and make sure that they still belong. And that's what a lot of us have been kind of struggling with this past year, is making sure that we still belong. We still belong in our teams at work. We still belong to our church, to our neighborhoods. We still belong to women's groups with Jason and Alan. We all have this need. Once we have satisfied our basic needs for water, food, and shelter, after that, the most basic human need is belonging. There's this international surveying group called Qualtrics, and it's a platform that a lot of people use to do, customer surveys, employee surveys. They took over 11,000 employee engagement surveys from 2020 and analyzed it to see what is the top concern of employees during this pandemic. And of all the things that we were so worried about in 2020, the number one concern of employees that came back was belonging. People wanting to make sure that they still belonged somewhere when this was over. So something we need to think about as we are all kind of emerging from this and we're figuring out what that new abnormal is going to be. If you see someone who might be struggling, maybe you have that team member who couldn't attend the Zoom happy hours because they were taking care of a sick family member, or they had a different home situation and weren't able to do those virtual get-togethers or the socially distanced get-togethers that people did, and they kind of feel on the fringes now. Extend a hand. Extend a hand to those folks. Look for them actively. You have a neighbor who has a health condition, who hasn't been able to get out, who's been in their home alone. Extend a hand. You want to come have dinner in our yard? You want to come have a glass of wine? Reach out at home, reach out to family members, reach out to those coworkers, extend a hand. And if you happen to be a person who is struggling with coming back, kind of feeling socially awkward, not sure what the rules are nowadays, extend a hand. Tell people, I feel kind of out of it. If anybody goes to lunch, let me know. I'd love to come. Be an inviter. People invite people who are inviters. So be an inviter. Whatever side of that coin you're on, extend a hand. All right. Second thing we really need to talk about. Things we have noticed about people when we couldn't see half of their face. So I know some of you thinking I'm going to go like the crow's feet route or the COVID-19. No, I'm not going that route. The thing that I have noticed as I have not been able to see people's faces is this phenomenon of old retired men wearing their giant cell phones clipped to their hips. And you all know exactly who I'm talking about, right? I first noticed it on my dad. And then once you notice something, then you can't not notice it in other people. So I noticed it in my dad. And then I swear to you, Easter Mass, this Sunday, I'm sitting down there, I just got my communion, I'm kneeling down. I see this old retired man going up to, receive the consecrated body of our Lord and Savior. Cell phone on the hip, This may be the most holy day in the Catholic Church, but I am not going to miss a call. And it's almost like, while they're cruising the aisles of the hardware store, they need you to know that I might be retired, but people still call me. Enough people to necessitate quick access to that phone. You know, I need to be able to really grab that ThinkPad off of my hip, not mess with any pockets or anything to answer it. And when they answer that phone, I can guarantee you 3 things. 1, the font is going to be 60 point or larger. 2, they are going to do something that I call announce, question, and diagnose. Announce, question, and diagnose. They're going to hold the phone out like this and say, Julie, what's she want? Bet it's that damn water heater again. And then to answer the phone, they are going to stab it as if they're spearing a yellowfin tuna. Hello? Now I mentioned I've noticed this on my dad. And one of the reasons that I've noticed this in my dad is because we've been spending a lot more time with my parents in Opelousas, which is where they live, over the pandemic. And my parents live in Opelousas. I grew up in Jennings. They live in Opelousas partially because about 6 years ago they moved back to help with my grandmother. And my dad was a hardware salesman all of his life. He's retired now, but he is by far living the toughest job he has ever had. And that is as a caregiver for my mother, who has advanced stage Parkinson's, and my grandmother, who has very rapidly declining dementia. So my mother and my father are in their late 60s. My grandmother's in her early 90s. I mean, we're so blessed to still have her. You know, dementia is such a funny thing because, you know, she can still cook a gumbo. And let me tell you, if it drops below 85 degrees, there will be a gumbo cooked at 538 Kennerson Hills in Opelousas. But she has forgotten who my mother is, who is her daughter. And sometimes when she sees my mom, she thinks that it is her own twin sister who passed away about 10 years ago. And this is the part that we all kind of have to laugh about a little bit. Sometimes when she sees my mom, she thinks it is another woman that my dad is shacking up with. And we kind of have to laugh because, I mean, you know, it's gotten a little bit outrageous. You know, but because of this, my dad can't caretake for both of them together. They have to be in separate houses. So he's constantly like ping-ponging back and forth between the two of them. And I feel like I can tell these funny stories. I can poke fun at my dad because he would laugh, you know, if he was here. And my dad has been one of the greatest teachers in my life. My mom was actually a teacher, and I learned a tremendous amount from her. But my dad was one of my greatest teachers. He taught me, you know, I said he was a hardware salesman all of his life. My dad taught me at a very young age how to build things. We have built more than a dozen pieces of furniture together. Taught me the difference in it when you use a jigsaw and when you use a circular saw and a flathead and a Phillips and, you know, all of that. And I treasure that so much. Taught me a large percentage of my robust vocabulary, including the word robust at an early age. But one thing I guess I wasn't anticipating learning from my dad that has been very, I guess, acute the past couple of months is something I have started to call active empathy. Now, before I get into this, I want to talk just a little bit about the difference in empathy and sympathy. So sympathy is the lazy version of empathy. Sympathy is saying, I'm so sorry you're going through X. Sympathy is feeling sorry for somebody, hating that they're in that bad situation. And sympathy is easy because you check the box real quick, right? Oh, your grandma died. I'm so sorry to hear that. Man, I'm so sympathetic. Check. Done. Empathy is a lot harder. Empathy is active. You have to actively choose to try to see what that person is going through from their perspective. And that's hard. And that is something that we have been called to do a lot this past year. Is what is the other perspective that I might not have seen until now? How can I choose to actively see that and act with empathy? Now, here's the thing about active empathy. We have a limited quantity of it. You cannot be actively engaged in every cause. You cannot be. You know, when I used to fundraise for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, one of the responses I hated the most, I'm perfectly fine on being a salesperson. I don't mind. I know you're going to get 9 no's for every yes. But the no I hated the most was when I would go to a business owner or somebody and ask them to sponsor an event, and they would say, "Oh, I can't do that. If I sponsored you, I'd have to sponsor everybody." And I would say, gosh, I actually hope that's not true. I actually hope it's that you don't like kids with cancer and you want to sponsor something else. Because I'd hate to think that you have this successful business here and you feel no compulsion to give back to your community. I hope it's just me. We don't have the empathy to give. We don't have the active empathy to give to every cause. There are thousands of causes, right? I mean, so many were pushed to the forefront this year, and they're very worthy. The Black Lives Matter cause, the LGBTQ, rights. There is, saving the dolphins and saving the babies, and there's so many good causes, and not every cause can be your active empathy cause. But you know what speaks to you. You know when somebody talks to you about it, what kind of catches your heart or what sticks with you. Those are the things you are being called to have active empathy for, to get engaged, to really understand that perspective. And whether that's a mission trip to a third world country or being an active frontline, peaceful protester somewhere, or whether you're being called to your own living room, or potentially to give some active empathy to the person you see when you're looking in the mirror. And every season of our life will be called in a different way. You're not going to be called the exact same way all the time. But pay attention to what season of your life you're in and what you are being called to give that active empathy towards. Now, I do want to give a caveat here. I'm not talking about being a kind and civil human being. We have an unlimited capacity to be kind and civil. That should not be reserved for certain people. But that active, engaged, this is your cause kind of empathy, we all need to seek out and find 1 or 2 that are worthy of our time and energy at any given point. All right, on to our third thing. The thing I know all of you have been dying to talk about. You've been talking about in all of your small circles. How are we on time? Oh, we're good. Korean bathhouses. Now, I feel like I need to give a little bit of backstory here.
Yeah.
Okay. Potentially. So, my very best friend, Courtney, had one of the worst years you could possibly drum up for somebody. You ever have a friend who goes through that? It's like, God, the hits just keep on coming. She had a very traumatic and difficult divorce that left her as a single mom. And during that year, when she was really struggling with this, she came down with this rash over her entire body that was akin to poison ivy for 2 months. A dozen doctor's visits, couldn't figure out what it was, couldn't get it to go away. It hurt to put clothes on, which she had to do to go make money to raise her child that she was raising by herself. Soon as that rash dried up, her entire home, her small, cute little cottage in South Downs in Baton Rouge, was infested with fleas from feral cats in the neighborhood that were living under her house. I'm talking like the get rid of furniture, having to industrial wash everything cloth in your whole home kind of infestation. And I will never forget the call she gave me from the laundromat. She was like, "This is it. This is the thing. This is what's gonna do me in. I just can't do anything else." And I was like, You can't do anything else. You can't absorb anything else. This is terrible. And it's funny because we'd be in so many conversations with friends and they would say, like, "Courtney, I just don't know how you're doing it." And she would say, "Well, I don't know how to not do it. Just got to wake up and keep going." It's kind of like what Diane was talking about in the beginning. You just wake up and you say, "Well, what do I have to do today? A, B, and C. I got to get through it," right? So she went through this traumatic year, and at the same time, I was having a really stressful moment at work. And it was nothing compared to what she was going through, but it was a pretty stressful time, and it was culminating with this big event that I was planning in November, which was right around the time that her divorce was going to be finalized. So we said, "Look, when my event ends, your divorce is finalized, let's go on a girls' weekend." She said, "Yes, we're going to do that. Let's go to Southern California." I said, 100%. let's do it. We found these, it was like the stars were aligning. We found these like $98 flights and these awesome places to stay. Everything was working out. We sat at this coffee shop and planned everything. And I said, just curious, why were you so, insistent on Southern California? And she said, well, I want to take you to a Korean bathhouse in Los Angeles. I said, all right, I'm game. I'm game for pretty much anything. I'm that friend. She said, now here's a little life lesson I'm going to drop on you. If someone ever tells you that at a place you are about to visit, everyone is naked, you should believe them. So, I don't know how, but of all the times she reiterated this to me, it just didn't stick. But she sure was right. So here's the situation when you walk into a Korean bathhouse. You walk up to registration. Those people have clothes. You check in, Then you go to this dressing room, which is titled inappropriately. You take off all of your clothes and put them in a locker. And one would assume that there would be some towel or robe situation at this point. But this is where the naked comes in. There is not. So you're like, oh, okay. So this, okay. And then they usher you into this room that is roughly the size of a gymnasium. And on half of the room are these soaking tubs. And in the other half are the tables where you get your full body exfoliation and massage. So you walk in and someone directs you, shower and go to the tubs. And here's another little life lesson. When a naked Korean woman gives you a set of instructions, you do exactly what she says. So we walk in, we shower, we go sit in the soaking tubs. And Courtney, perfectly at home, just starts talking about something. I don't even know, the price of a barrel of oil, a rerun of Grace and Frankie, something. And at some point I said, I need to tell you this. If anything you are saying right now is important, you're gonna have to tell me later. Because right now, it's taking every ounce of my brain for the 12-year-old deep down inside me not to laugh that everyone is naked. And she grabbed my face like you grab your kid when they've eaten something they're not supposed to. And she said, you look at me. Don't you ruin this for me. I need this. And I said, yes, ma'am, I'm doing everything I can. So thank God, shortly following that, we get called to our massage mats on the other side of the gymnasium. So we walk over and we're placed on tables next to each other. And in case you're curious, here's the schedule of events once you're laying on the table. The first thing they do is take a 5-gallon bucket of some glorious smelling spa water, warm situation and just douse your whole body with it. And if it sounds kind of like a luxurious waterboard, that's exactly what it is. And then once you're, appropriately wet, then they start the exfoliating. They whip out this like deconstructed loofah situation and just start going to town. And when I tell you, you have never felt cleaner and dirtier at the same moment in your life. I mean, there is not a dead skin cell left on your human body when they finish. I'm laying there, soaking this all in, and I'm like, I wonder how Courtney's doing. So I look over, and I see this. Her entire body is shaking because she is being exfoliated so violently. And yet she had the most blissful smile on her face. And all I could think was, she needed this. So I gave myself permission to just shut my eyes and enjoy the scrub and rub. Turns out I needed it too. So let's talk about resiliency and self-care. Resiliency, that's been another buzzword this year, right? We've talked all about like the businesses that have been resilient, and our kids are so resilient, and the people who have been resilient. But I think we have a really screwed up idea of what resiliency is. So I think when we think of people who are resilient, we think of superheroes. We think of somebody who is going along in life and then they hit rock bottom. And somehow, through something, they then catapult up like a phoenix rising from the ashes, and they hit the pinnacle of their life. And they write a book about it. You know, they're Steve Jobs. They get fired from their first company and come back to be the CEO. But for most of us, that is not the kind of resiliency that we need or that we display often. I have no doubt that everyone in this room has shown some resiliency over the past year. You are here. You obviously have had some degree of resiliency. But what resiliency for most of us looks like is like we're going along our life and it's like, right? It's not down and up. It's some loop-de-loops and some kind of stair steps all over the place. It's what I call Dolly Parton resiliency. Tumble out of bed, stumble to the kitchen, pour yourself a cup of ambition, and just do the next day. A friend of mine calls it pulling an all-dayer. It's one of my favorite phrases. She's like, girl, you need to be proud of yourself. Did you get up today? You do all the things? You finished the day? You pulled an all-dayer. Pat yourself on the back. Like, don't be mad at all the stuff you didn't do. Be proud of all the stuff you did. Have that glass of wine. Don't have it with a side of guilt. Have it with a side of triumph. Like, all-dayers. You know, how many all-dayers did you pull? 365 since last March. That is the kind of resiliency that we most often need, that we most often display, and that we need to have some like self-appreciation for. That, man, we do get up and do it every day. You know, we get through the things. We've gotten through this global pandemic. One of my very favorite shows, my husband calls it my old man show. It's a thing in my house. It's CBS Sunday mornings. And my kids know 8 o'clock on the dot on Sunday morning, everyone in the house better be quiet because mom needs to hear her trumpets. I need my hot cup of coffee and my trumpets. It resets me for the week. A couple of months ago, they had a psychologist on CBS Sunday morning, and she was talking about the fact that anyone who experiences 2 traumatic events at the same time has an exponentially higher mental and emotional reaction to that than if they had experienced the exact same things separately. Because they are happening together, it makes both of them worse. So we have all been experiencing a traumatic event this past year, every single one of us. And I have to imagine most of you also had a second traumatic event. Something else happened. You got sick. A family member got sick. Someone maybe passed away. You were juggling your Zoom calls with your kids' Zoom calls. And then there's also the non-pandemic normal stuff that didn't go away. People still got diagnosed with cancer and autism, and people had divorces and heart attacks. You know, all those things still happened as we were all experiencing this collective traumatic event. So even when we think we're fine, I'm fine, we're all fine. You're not fine, as my grandmother would say. there's a good chance, you have a heightened emotional stress reaction that has happened at some point and maybe is still there. One of the things that is so whacked out about this whole experience is that we have normalized this higher level of stress because we have become so used to it, living in it for so long. And we've got to stop and say, like, whew, that ain't normal. I know things are never going to go back to how they were, but going forward, I don't want to be at a heightened level of stress all the time. I got to figure out, what do I need? What's going to help me be resilient? What level of self-care makes sense for me? And whether that's I need to go on more walks because that makes me feel good, or I need to call people and reconnect because I've lost that belonging and that's not making me feel good. Or whether it's that you need a scrub and rub. We need to identify, like, maybe I'm not at rock bottom, but man, I've been just down and up and down and up and down and up, and I need to find that thing that's going to help me get back to feeling really good. And acknowledge all the work I have put in over the past year. So, 3 things, right? Low interest mortgages, things we notice about people when we can't see their face, and Korean bathhouses. So what's that half thing that I was talking about earlier? The half thing is your story. Because I know you've all been sitting here very engaged, you've been a lovely audience. It's not necessarily that you really love that story about my dad or about my friends. It's because when I was telling those stories, they connected with your story. And you thought about your dad or your grandpa. And you thought about your friends who you've missed. So I want you to stop right now and think about what story of yours bubbled up today as we've been sitting here together. What story maybe that isn't finished just yet? That you potentially have some opportunity to turn in the way that you want it to go. So take just a minute and I want you to think of your story. And I want you to think of one word that signifies that story. All right, I want you to turn to your table and tell them that one word. You don't have to say anything else. Just give them that one word. And now you got caught if you didn't think of a word. Now you got to think of one real quick. Go. All right. I want you to take that word with you today. One of the reasons I asked you to turn and say it out loud is because it's going to stick with you if you say it out loud. I want you to take that word with you today. Write it down somewhere. Email it to yourself. And as you look at it the rest of the day, I want you to think, what is a tiny step that I can take to end this story in the way I want it to end? Tiny step. All great change starts with one tiny step. Is it just that you need to call a friend? Is it that you need to maybe put a little more active in your empathy for someone or for some cause? Is it that you need to focus on some self-care? And whether that has anything to do with low interest mortgage rates, face masks, or Korean bathhouses, or belonging, active empathy, and resilience. Whatever your thing is, put a little bit of yourself into it. If you need to, find an accountability buddy. Tell them what your story is, and tell them what you want to do about it. And if you don't have anyone that you can call me. I'll be your accountability buddy. I'll be your cheerleader. I'm going to have a lot of time in the car next week. I'm driving out to this birthday party at Wooden Carriage House at Township Forest. All right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.